In 2024, Cory Suski lowered silver carp into a tank of Chicago Waterway water and watched them slow down. They had been eating 70% of the biomass in stretches of the Illinois River. 50 million pounds pulled from that river over 15 years at 10 cents a pound, and the fish kept coming. Then the water itself stopped them. Sewage, road salt, industrial runoff. The nightmare was never the carp. The Illinois River did not surrender gradually. It was displaced. Native fish crowded out stretch by stretch, replaced by a single silver body, repeated 10,000 times over. I'm Dr. Raymond Finch. I have watched rivers lose their communities before, but nothing I had seen moved quite like this. One species ploughing through a food web, the way floodwater strips a riverbank bare. In some stretches of the Illinois, silver carp now grind through 70% of everything, living in the water column, leaving almost no energy for the species that built this system. Managers pulled nets. They funded commercial crews. They stretched seine after seine across the current and hauled until their arms gave out. 3 interventions, years of effort, real money. And the invasion front barely moved. The electric dispersal barrier sits 37 river miles, underwater current running continuously, pushing fish back from the Great Lakes doorstep. Yet the invasion front stalled well before the barrier. The carp were not pressing the wire the way everyone expected. Something upstream was pushing back, and nobody had named it yet. In 2023, a seine crew pulled from the same stretch in 10 days, double the previous year's catch using identical gear. The fish were there. They were not running the upstream reaches of the Chicago Waterway churn with sewage, effluent, road salt, and industrial discharge. Every ecologist I know spent decades trying to scrub that out of the system. Every one of us. What Suski's team found in 2024 was that silver carp exposed to Chicago waterway water burned more energy just holding position, their bodies working harder simply to survive the chemistry around them. The weapon between the carp and Lake Michigan was never the barrier. It was the sewage. And now the question sitting in every management room is whether that was accident or whether it is something anyone can use. The numbers on paper look like progress tonnage hauled, pounds logged, crews deployed season after season. The ledger grew impressive fast. But you can only trust a ledger if the thing you are counting is actually going down. And in the hardest hit stretches of the Illinois, it was not. Let me place you in the geography, because the scale of it is the whole argument. In the hardest hit reaches of this system, silver carp had ground their way to 70% of everything alive in the column. Not a share of the population, a share of the entire living weight of the river. Down at Starved Rock, crews ran a single seine operation across 10 days in 2023 and dragged from the same reach where identical gear had pulled only half that weight the year before, double the catch. Same net, same reach, same 10 days. The population was not collapsing. It was accelerating upstream from all of that. The Chicago Area Waterway system sits from open Great Lakes water, with an electric dispersal barrier stretched across the canal as the last physical line anyone had drawn. And across all Illinois state waterways combined, not this corridor alone, but every monitored reach in the system, 78 million pounds was stripped out over 15 years without bending the population curve. This is the part that made me stop and reread the field notes. Every pound removed was real work, paid for, counted, reported, and the fish absorbed every pound of it and kept packing the corridor tighter. What the removal records do not show is why the invasion front never actually pushed into the Chicago Waterway and closed those final 37 miles. The nets were not holding it. Something else was Everyone counting pounds thought they were making progress. Nobody was asking why the advance had stalled. Because when something goes right, you do not interrogate the reason. You file the report and go home. The state did not walk away from this fight. It built a machine, 3 separate instruments running at the same time for over a decade and a half, aimed at one corridor of water. Commercial fishermen got paid for every pound they pulled. 10 cents a pound, enough to keep boats on the water, not enough to make a dent in what was underneath it. The Seine nets scaled up. The electric dispersal barrier stood guard. The harvest incentives kept the boats moving. All 3 instruments ran simultaneously, and the invasion front held exactly where it was. What it took to run this program was not small. 3 instruments, 1 corridor, 15 years of coordinated pressure. The cumulative weight pulled from the Illinois River alone reached 50 million. 50 million pounds stripped out over those 15 years. The front did not move. That is a staggering weight of extracted animal. And the fish behind those fish just closed the gap and kept pressing forward. The nets were harvesting. They were not deterring. Here is the thing nobody budgeted for. Suski's team published in 2024 that silver carp lowered into Chicago Area Waterway, water burned more energy just holding still. Their bodies working harder simply to survive the chemistry around them. Results showed that silver carp experience an elevated metabolic cost in CAWS water, along with reductions in swimming behavior. Schneider, Esbaugh and Suski, Scientific Reports 2024, no net produces that no electric pulse replicates it. Put 2 conditions side by side. In clean water, the fish drove hard upstream. In the waterway's contaminated flow, sewage, road salt, industrial runoff, they slowed and their reserves drained. And I've spent a long time believing that pollution was the enemy of wild water. What Suski's team handed us is something genuinely uncomfortable. The contaminated stretch was doing the job the barrier and the boats could not. No salary, no management plan, no direction. The most effective deterrent in the corridor ran entirely on sewage and road salt. And nobody noticed because the advance had stalled, and when something goes right, you do not ask why it did. The contaminants do not arrive all at once. They diffuse through the gill membrane, molecule by molecule, and the body registers them the only way a body can, by spending more to stay upright. Suski's team drew the water straight from the Chicago Area Waterway system, sewage load, road salt, industrial runoff, the full chemical signature of a city draining itself into a shipping canal, and they ran it through a tank. They placed silver carp in that tank and measured what the chemistry did to the machinery inside them. The difference was not subtle. In clean control water, the animals churned forward steadily. Lowered into Chicago Waterway water, they slowed and burned, their bodies grinding through more fuel just to hold position against a gentle current. That is the physical sequence, and it is brutally simple. The contaminants raise the operating cost. The operating cost drains the energy budget, and the energy budget is exactly what drives upstream expansion. Less fuel, less distance. Every time. The paper Suski's team published documented it plainly: elevated metabolic cost in the waterway and measurable reductions in swimming behavior. Not a deterrent anyone engineered, a consequence nobody budgeted for. Now consider what every clean water program on this waterway is working toward. Scrub the sewage load, strip the road salt, reduce the industrial runoff. The goal is a healthier river, and a healthier river is a river that costs less to swim through. That is the part nobody has answered yet. The contaminated stretch is doing biological work that no engineered system fully replicated. Clean it up. and you may lift the only metabolic toll that was holding the front in place. I have spent decades arguing for cleaner rivers. I still believe in that. But I've never before had to sit with the possibility that the cleanup itself carries a cost we have not finished calculating. What Suski's finding forces onto the table is not a reason to stop cleaning the waterway. It is a demand to understand the mechanism completely, before the front moves, not after. That mechanism, remove the stressor, the system moves toward what the stressor was blocking, is not a metaphor. It is physics. Every clean water program running on that waterway right now is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Strip out the sewage load, reduce the road salt, pull back the industrial runoff. The numbers on those programs look like victories, no? And by every measure they were built for, they are. What Suski's team documented is that those same victories may be dissolving the toll that has been holding silver carp in place, not by accident, not by negligence, just by the logic of what happens when a stressor lifts. Think about what that demands of us. For decades, the argument was simple: dirtier is deadlier and cleaner is better. Suski's finding does not overturn that. It adds a second column to the ledger, one nobody budgeted for. I have spent decades arguing for cleaner rivers. I still believe in that argument. But I have never before been handed a peer-reviewed finding that forced me to hold both things at once: the rightness of the goal and the risk hidden inside it. Biology does not care what you intended. Remove a metabolic toll, and the organism moves into the space the toll was sealing off. That is true whether the stressor was a predator, a contaminant, or a barrier somebody engineered on purpose. What the record does not yet settle is how fast that front would move if the chemistry shifted, or whether the electric barrier alone could hold it. That calculation has not been finished. Nobody has finished it. Suski's work is not a reason to stop. It is a demand to go in with open eyes, to understand the mechanism before the front moves, not after the Great Lakes have already paid the price of our good intentions. Share this with someone who still believes the damage is permanent, because the evidence says otherwise, and so does this story. Drop your region and one species you have personally watched disappear from your area in your lifetime. And yes or no, in the comments, have you ever seen something come back that you were certain was gone for good? Because if the answer is yes, I want to hear that story.